fail, I fear no ill. With thee, dear Lord, beside me, thy rod and staff my comfort still, thy cross before to guide me. Thou spreadst a table in my sight, thy arm shall grace bestow, and all the transports of delight with which my cup o'erfloweth, and so through all the length of days my goodness fadeth never. Good shepherd, may I sing thy praise within thy heart forever, and so through all the length of days thy goodness fadeth never. Good shepherd, may I sing thy praise within thy house forever.
Good morning. It's an honor to be invited here. I can tell you that when it came time for us to see that we had the opportunity as our congregation to use this particular space for our High Holy Days, in one particular way, people said it was such the perfect fit, and that is because the rabbi would have to always look at that clock, and that made everybody very happy. So I was asked to talk today a little bit about the Torah and what it is, what it means to the Jewish people. So I brought some show and tell, and I'd like to start off with that. I'm also going to have this in the Great Hall. I just think we need a little one of the card tables out so I can put it down. So this is one of our smaller Torahs. We have one that's actually even smaller that has micro writing, and that's one that would easily travel around in case we had to have services in someone's home. This is also one of our smaller ones. Torahs are dressed in a particular way with a breastplate put on, and if anybody can catch the reference to this, that'd be something that I'm going to ask in a minute. We also have hanging from one of the wooden bars that will hold the scroll, and I'm going to take off this wrap. We have something called the yad, the hand, when we point and read the Torah, so we don't actually touch the writing with our hands lest we scrape it or smudge it. So this is written by hand. It's have to make sure to be very careful here. This scroll in particular, it always has a belt to keep it closed. This is the European style of Torah, not the Yemenite or Spanish style of Torah, which is encased in a very different way. So this is what a scribe would write on parchment. So the parchment is from any kosher slaughtered animal. And you can see here that each piece of parchment is then sewn to another piece of parchment, and the scribe writes exactly using a previous Torah to write this one. It takes about 6 months to write a Torah scroll, and the Torah reads from right to left, as all Hebrew books did. I actually opened up this Psalm book right to left, and I said, oh, it goes the other way. And so a scribe, it would take him, as I said, about that long to write a Torah scroll. And the Torah letters have to be clearly visible. The Torah itself, by the way, has no punctuation in it, and there's no vowels, so it's as if you're reading English and you saw T-H-N-K space Y. You'd know that that's not think you, but it's thank you. But someone might say, but it could hint at think you. In other words, that's also part of a Jewish perspective, is to see what additional meanings you could possibly glean from the Torah. So, does anybody here know so far how the Torah is dressed in relationship to any other historical figure? Also, I brought one of our prettier crowns. This clearly does not go on this particular Torah. It's too big. This goes on one of our bigger ones. So this crown with bells, all the crowns have bells on them, and even this breastplate has some bells. See that? With a belt, with a breastplate, with a crown. Anybody who's been to a Catholic church? Yeah? Who dresses like that? Priests dress like that. And why do they dress like that? Because they're dressing like the ancient priests in Solomon's temple. So we dress the Torah to conserve that visual connection of the priests. The priests wore bells on their garment so that you could hear them coming before they arrived. So we do dress the Torah to remind us of that connection for how the priests work, because we do not have a temple anymore in Jerusalem. So that is really what the Torah is as a physical item. And as I said, when we read the Torah right to left, we're pointing at the words. And should a word be smudged, should it be that it got damaged or dried out and, let's say, a letter cracked, and I couldn't read the letter, or it looks like another letter, then I'm not permitted to keep reading that Torah. I have to stop immediately, put it away, take another Torah out, and continue. I'm not allowed to read what's called a non-kosher Torah. In other words, it has to say letter for letter, word for word, exactly what the tradition passed down. There can be no confusion. All right, and there's actually a nice little tradition of how you deal with a letter that may or maybe not, you can read it or not. You bring up a child, 6 years old, approximately 6 years old, who can read Hebrew. And you cover all the letters around this one letter. You bring that child up. You can imagine this happened during services. And you just make it so that one letter is visible to the child. And you say, what do you see? And if the child says the letter correctly, yes, that is the Resh, or yes, that is the Dalet, then it's still a kosher Torah. And then you can keep using it. But if the child says, I can't tell what it is, or not, so then we would have either that whole section of parchment taken out, fixed, or we do have scribes that travel around the country who come in and they will see if they can fix a letter or fix a section. And we do have, recently we had someone a few years ago who came and checked all of our Torahs and actually had to fix a few of them because some things were looking like they just were not readable. So that's what a scribe does. They use an ink that is vegetable-based. They use a quill. And no metal, though this is metal, no metal is used to make a Torah because metal is potentially used for war. So only non-metal is used to make a Torah. Okay, so that's a little there. There's so much I have I said at least 20 minutes. We'll see how that goes. Yeah, I know. So what is the Torah? The Torah is the 5 books of Moses. So for those who know, the line General Electric lights never dim. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Everybody, General Electric lights never dim. Now you'll have it forever. So that is the story from creation through the death of Moses, right before the Israelites are about to enter the land of Canaan, led by Joshua. That's the first section of the Hebrew Bible. The Hebrew Bible is the Torah, the 5 books of Moses. Then it's the prophets, the book of the prophets, Jeremiah, Elijah, Isaiah, etc. And then the third book of the Hebrew Bible is the writings, that has the book of Ruth in it, has the Psalms, has Proverbs. So that's what we call the Hebrew Bible, those 3 sections. But the Torah is just the 5 books of Moses. And that's not just a just. It is really a foundational document for the Jewish people. But it's really it goes even deeper than that. The word Torah shares the same Hebrew root as the word for parent, shares the same Hebrew root as the Hebrew word for teacher, because the Torah is really a teaching. It is a guidebook for how to live a life of holiness and righteousness, both in relationship to fellow man, fellow human beings, and also the commandments, of which there are a total of 613 commandments. That's a big number in Judaism, 613. The thou shalt and the thou shalt nots, okay? 613. So it's this guide not only for the relationship between man, but also between the Jewish people and God. So for example, honor the Sabbath and keep it holy. That's a command. You should not lie, you should not steal. That's also a command. Eating matzah on Passover, that is a command. So do not make idols. These are commands. It's not a suggestion, it's a command. And Judaism does not really care if you are in the mood. This is a very important idea. I feel like giving charity, it would be nice to give charity. Judaism does not care if you're in the mood. So if a person comes to your door, it is really forbidden to say, God will provide. No, you have to give charity. It's a command. As a matter of fact, the Hebrew word for charity is justice. The word is justice. You have to do what is just for everyone who's out there. I'll send that to Congress. So if really the Torah was just the story of the relationship of God and the Jewish people, and some people really do think that the Torah, all 5 books, were given to Moses on Mount Sinai as a revelation, letter for letter, word for word, and that Moses was a very good secretary, that he was a good scribe and he wrote everything down. That is a more fundamentalist Jewish belief. It is, I would say, not a belief of the majority of the Jewish community who are in the modern world. We believe definitely that the Torah is divinely inspired, that the Torah's stories have meaning, that they teach important messages about how to live a holy life, and the divinity is in the message, right? But it's not a book of facts. That's never the case, really, that it means to be a science book or it means to be a history book. And I could give you one easy example, and that is, if I were to ask you what's the definition of a day, for those who are more science-oriented, you'd say it is the spinning of the earth on its axis in relationship to the sun. That's the definition of a day. It's about 24 hours. And yet, in the creation story itself, right, we have 6 days of creation, And on the seventh day, God rested for the Sabbath. But the sun and the moon aren't created actually until day 4. So how do you have day 1, day 2, and day 3? So I would say it's really also a very strong Jewish tradition that we understand the Torah really giving a message that's a metaphor of holiness and goodness, and it's not interested in facts. Granted, some things are facts. A camel looks a certain way. Right? A well looks a certain way. If you're digging a well, it looks a certain way. A robe, Joseph's robe, looked a certain way. But it's the message that matters, and it's not interested, as I said, in being a history book. But when you do read the Torah, it can be very confusing and difficult to understand, and not only that, it can be upsetting. It was written in a certain historical context. And people often who are railing against this foundational document, they say, what a terrible text. An eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. What terrible cruelty is that? But the Jewish belief is that while the Torah is the foundational document of the Jewish people, it is not Judaism. This is very important. We believe that the Torah, the written Torah, came also with an oral understanding that joined with it. Simultaneously with the written Torah came the oral Torah. And I can share with you right now why that is so important. If I were to say to you, that's bad, you would think I'm saying that something is not good. However, if I was living in the 1970s and I said, that's bad, you'd say, actually, that's really very awesome, right? Very good. And, that's sick is something that you hear today. But there are more expressions. What's cooking? Chicken? You look blue today. Well, it doesn't mean literally what it's saying. It means figuratively what it's saying. So imagine an ancient text that's doing the same thing. And as I said, the Torah has no punctuation. Honor thy father, and thy mother thou shalt not murder. Oh, sorry, thou shalt not kill. Sorry, thou shalt not kill. So the oral understanding of the Torah must be fused whenever we read the Torah itself. Now, we read the Torah every Sabbath. We read a portion of the Torah. It's divided up into 54 portions. And that makes it possible because of the way the lunar calendar works in the Jewish calendar. We have a lunar calendar with a solar corrective. I know I'm confusing everyone here, but Ramadan, right, Islamic calendar is completely lunar. That's why Ramadan can happen summer, winter, fall. But the Jewish calendar is lunar until a certain point where Passover, which has to be in the spring, Passover starts to approach winter, right? As they said this year, Rosh Hashanah was early. I don't know if Rosh Hashanah was right after Labor Day. Hanukkah is on Thanksgiving this year. It's the first time in it'll be 140 years before this happens again. So what happens is when the calendar Passover starts to come towards winter, we don't have a leap day, we have a leap month. So next year, Rosh Hashanah is going to be a month later because this year we have a leap month. Right before Passover, we add a month and it pushes it back, this corrective pushes it back into the spring because Passover has to be in the spring. So we're not allowed at all to just read the Torah. It's one of the most un-Jewish things is to just read the Bible. It's practically forbidden because then you think that your historical and cultural and literary understandings are sufficient. And they're not. They're not. So when I'm reading the Torah, the members of our congregation have this book. It's called a Chumash, which means the five, has the 5 books of Moses in it. And this Hebrew up here is what's in the Torah. Everything else on the page is commentary. Everything else on this page is commentary, and it's just a hint of all the commentaries that try to explain. So, for example, going back to an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, that's a law, right? What do you do when there's civil damage? Any lawyers here? Usually I get a lot of hands in my crowd. Okay. So we have something called the Talmud. The Talmud is, again, this expansion of the oral law to today's situation. For example, you're not allowed to light a fire on the Sabbath. Well, is a microwave oven fire? Is electricity fire? Is a combustion engine fire? Is there fire really in your car when you turn it on? It's a combustion engine. So the rabbis always were interested in trying to understand the real world in relationship to this ancient text. But if you were to open up the commentary about an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, this is a Talmud. Okay, so here we go. So I spent 6 years studying Talmud in rabbinical school. In the center, that's a quote often from the Torah, immediately followed by the oral teachings that came with it, and everything around that. Imagine dropping a pebble in a pond, right? You're going to see rings and rings and rings. Everything around that is more and more and more commentary. This is the tractate called Kedoshim, which is holiness, and that has to do with personal behavior that brings about holiness or not. But if this were the one that talked about an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, it would have one word right away to start off, which is value. It would say value. In other words, the value of an eye for an eye, the value of a tooth for a tooth. So that's, again, where you wouldn't take literally what the Torah is saying, because the oral Torah, the Talmud, would tell you, no, you're misunderstanding what the Torah is saying. It's not, you look blue today. It doesn't mean you actually are wearing blue clothes. Okay, it means this. So that's extremely important to understand, because the whole point is for us to understand what God wants from us and how we live each day, because, again, what you think is not relevant. Right? When Jimmy Carter, I don't know if those who remember it, was interviewed in Playboy magazine, and he said, I lust in my heart, and I feel so bad about it, right? He feels he's sinning in his heart. We have some men who definitely remember this story. And Jewish people laughed. We said, of course we lust in our heart. The issue is if there's any other body part that's getting involved. So the action is what matters, not the thought. Again, I really felt like giving charity today. No, you get no points for that. Okay, so that's the Talmud. And you might say, well, wait a minute, if it's an oral Torah, if it's passed on orally from generation to generation, from teachers to students and teachers to students, how could it be that it's now written in a book? And for those people who wonder, how can something be an oral Torah, I assure you that there are people who knew the Iliad, the Odyssey, completely by heart. This was a skill in ancient days that was important. Rap songs can go on for a very long time, perfectly, from rapper to listener. We had a group of people who, in ancient days, they were the professional memorizers. And it actually was better if they didn't really understand so much, because then they might interpret. They would memorize they had this talent, it was identified early on. They were taught the oral tradition. And then they would be where the scholars, were talking. And the scholar would say, what did Rabbi Yehoshua say on this matter? And the professional memorizer could repeat it exactly. During the Roman period, the Romans hunted down this group of people. They were called the Tanaim. They hunted them down, and they figured that if they could destroy the Jewish library, that they could destroy the Jewish people. And something that is completely forbidden, which is to write down the oral Torah, a decision was made that it had to be written down, or else we would be gone. And so in the year 220, a famous rabbi, Yehuda Anasi, in a little town called Sipori in Israel, he collected all of these teachings, organized them, and wrote them down, and that's the foundation for the Talmud. So, and yet there are people who can shut their eyes and they can say, oh yeah, page such and such, 7 lines down, 4 words in, this is what it says. There are still groups of people who can do that. But as I said, it's not just the story of the Jewish people. If that were the case, the relationship with the Jewish people, it would start with Abraham. It does not start with Abraham. It starts from creation. And this is very, very important. It starts with Adam. And Adam is the first human being. And so the Torah for us is a document about behavior. It's a document about, again, ritual purity and action purity and correctness and what's right and just. And it's also the start of who I am as a Jewish person, not a blip alone in the universe, but I'm part of a people. And for any parent who's ever been asked by a child, Mommy, tell me about the day I was born. Tell me that story again. Or when a child says to a grandparent, tell me what life was like when you were a little boy. These are identity stories. So the Torah is the story of my people, but also of the whole world, and how we understand that God has a relationship with all people all over the world, and just has one particular relationship with the Jewish people. God made a covenant with Noah. God made a covenant with Abraham. God made a covenant with David, King David. God has made a covenant with a lot of different people, and we believe that very strongly. The Talmud says the righteous of all nations have an equal share in the world to come. That's a really important Jewish belief. The righteous of all nations, and we do have an idea of what's righteous, right? There are certain things that are, forbidden for all people. Having unjust courts is forbidden for all people. Murder, we consider to be forbidden for all people. But the righteous of all nations. And that's why traditionally Jewish people, we discourage conversion to Judaism. Because we know that bacon probably tastes very good. So it's forbidden for a Jewish person to eat pork, but it's not forbidden for a non-Jewish person to eat pork. But this is part of our story and what's meaningful to us. All right. But as I said, it doesn't start with Abraham. It starts with the whole world. And really, as I just finish up here, if the Torah is truly, truly damaged beyond repair, it is buried. It's considered the soul of the Jewish people. Right? The words themselves actually are the soul, the words. The Torah itself is the body. And what do you do with a body to show respect in our tradition? We bury a body. My grandfather came from Russia. By the way, an illegal immigrant. He snuck in. And he could have gone to Argentina. He could have gone to Australia from Russia. He could have gone to many different places. By the luck of his courage, I am an American. But the truth is, I could have been born anywhere. So I've learned that Abraham Lincoln was a great guy. Abraham Lincoln did a lot of important things. And I'm happy for who Abraham Lincoln was. But Abraham is mine. And that's a very big difference. Abraham Lincoln, important. Abraham is my forefather. And if you were to ask what the Torah means to us, it's the story of us as a people. It's a story of how to live a life of holiness and goodness, not as a suggestion, but as a command.